So welcome everybody. So today is also for me something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and I guess the coronavirus provokes new innovations, and that is to help people get a much deeper understanding of the ID, not just talking about the whole ID, but I've had people who've said to me, I understand this drive and I understand that drive, but I really don't understand, an avoid authenticator, an avoid verify, or what is a completer really? Like, if it's not about finishing, what is it really? And so I've always wanted to just dedicate a really good session to just one direction of a drive and unpack it and give you a much deeper understanding. And even if the drive we're talking about is not your ID, like if you're a verifier and we're talking about avoid verify, for example, or if you're a completer and we're talking about avoid complete, it's still really valuable to stay tuned in, because you're learning about people that are different to you, which may firstly be someone that you're either married to or parenting or working with. But invariably it's about how to work with diversity. And the reason that I called the company Link Up when I first began the business was because I realized that no one person is a 10 in everything, and that the only way you could really be the, quote unquote, complete person of all the different drives and talents was to link up with people who were different to you. And through that combined complementary synergistic effort of those combinations coming together, when everyone links up like that, that's when you get the perfect ID, as it were, the complete set of IDs. And so when we work with a team and we see a lot of color, meaning the different instincts all represented, we know that a team then has the raw ingredients to be really, performing at its best. I'm sorry about my screen flashing. Let me just see if I can change that. So yeah, this is really exciting. I thought I'd start today, given the number of people on the call, I was sharing with you our vision for, and my vision, I guess, when I started this, because I never really started this business to develop the ID. I had a deeper mission, and the ID was an instrument for that. And I learned early, as some of you might know, about, my own talents and purpose in life. And I felt a real calling around this type of work. But when I discovered more and more about the ID, I just had this, passion, which has really never left me, around helping everyone in the world understand their ID. And, so that became my vision, for everyone in the world to know their ID, but more importantly, to use their ID. I'm not happy to say that we've got, X number of people who have done their ID. The fact that we might have done it is irrelevant to me. It's about how many people are using it. And so webinars like today, where people can come and learn more. And when people say to me, I haven't spoken to you for 7 years, but Paul, I still use it every day. I mean, that's what gives me the greatest joy, is when you know that it's alive in the way people are operating. So, the coronavirus came, and I thought, well, a way of maybe trying to make a contribution is to put these webinars on and just contribute something back to help people stay more aware of themselves, and more importantly, true to themselves as they navigate something that's unprecedented in the world. And we've already done 8 webinars. The first 4 were about working virtually. The last 4 were about high performance teaming. All of those have been posted onto our website. So if you missed any of those webinars, please feel free to go in there and just, treat them like little podcasts or tutorials that you can go through at any time. And then this now is the beginning of an 8-week series on unpacking each of the directions of the 4 instinctive drives. And, I can see when this is done, we'll probably then have feedback that says, can we now get into this area? So for me, I think we've begun something, and based on all the enthusiasm and the comments that we're getting each week, and the momentum, it gives me energy as well. If this served no other purpose than keeping me at my very best, that serves a good purpose in terms of leading the business. But we've been getting a lot of wonderful feedback. So I can see this being a part of our DNA as we go forward. So thank you for all the support, and in particular for being here today. Can I just ask you, before we get started, when we put the email out promoting today and what was it about, was there something in the email that really appealed to you, is it just the unpacking of the ID, or is there something specifically that you saw that you'd want to make sure that we cover? And you're probably on mute. So if you want to just make a comment, please just go off mute and share.
Hey Paul, my manager is a super high verifier. Perfect.
So you want to, and you're not?
I'm not, no. I'm a 5.
Oh, thanks, Sandy. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, I know. All right, anyone else?
You want to check the chat. There's a number of people who are offering ideas in chat.
There are, I can see that.
So do you want to have a read, Paul, or I can call them out for you?
I'm good. I'm reading very quickly. Okay. So does anyone have any particular preference whether we start with the verify drive or the avoid verify drive? Because I know that probably the area that a lot of people struggle with is the avoid verify drive, and I'm certainly willing to get into that. But on the other, and I know a lot of verifiers, even if you're a verifier, in sort of unpacking the avoid verify, you're going to learn a lot about verifier anyway. But I thought that might be a great place to get started. It's not where we probably normally start. We normally start with the verifiers, but I'm just interested enough if anyone has any particular preference.
Well, since I'm a high improvise, I think I'd like the avoid verify a lot.
So let me start there. I can see some good comments in the chat, and I can see that in doing the avoid verify, you're actually going to learn a lot about verify anyway. So before we get into the drives, I just have a couple of slides I'm going to show you about the team. Let me just call them up. Share. I'll just show you a few slides and I'll come back to the main screen so you can see everybody. So here's what I thought we would cover today. Can you see, is a slide up on your screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So these are all the different things, and I'm not going to go through these in order. That would be too sort of mechanical, and for someone with my ID, that sort of isn't really how I would shine. But these are the sorts of things that will come out of this. And what I'm going to do is, as I talk and as you share, and it's interactive, we will fill these boxes in. And at the end of the session, when we post the slides up on the website, then a lot of what we talk about today, we will put in these different boxes. Now, some of this resource is already available to you on the platform. You can go in and get all sorts of information, and there's videos as well that speak to a number of these areas. But given that we're always learning and we've always got new ideas coming to us, you know, about each of the drives, this will allow us to sort of do a refresh and an update on all of these different areas. And I also, there's some things that I can speak to that are better in the webinar than just putting it on a page like this, you know, when you can explain it and put some stories to it and so on. So I hope that by sharing all of this, it will really help you. Two areas that excite me are this one here about your genius. One of the things that I've, you know, observed the entire time I've had the ID is that when people are really in stride, there's not just a talent or a strength you have, there's something about the way you show up that is like at a genius level. And I believe everyone has that inside them, but we don't always show it because either we don't know what it is, so we don't know to let it, you know, let it shine, or we've got various stresses that are pulling us out of stride. And therefore, you know, we don't look like we've got anything all that special. But I just know when I've played with this for so long, everybody does. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. And then the second point was sort of my bonus. So what I do when I'm preparing things like this is I prepare it all, then I think, okay, but what's the bonus idea? What's the thing that I've got to dig deeper to sort of find and give as a bonus? And that was this bottom box down here, which was what shows up when you do. So given that your drive is not something you're always aware of, like being instinctive, it's just innate, it's inside you, it's just happening anyway. And what got me into developing this was that cognition. No amount of intellect can ultimately override your drive. You can temporarily, you know, suppress different parts of it, but it's always there. And when you are in stride and you sort of picture when you walk into the room, if you are in stride, something shows up when you do. Whether you try to or not, there's just something walks through the door like your shadow. And if you're in stride, that shadow will be a really positive shadow that has a really, you know, expansionary effect on the people in the room. And if you are out of stride, you can have a very suppressing negative effect from that shadow. And I think it's when people talk about self-awareness, people talk about knowing your strengths and knowing your vulnerabilities, but it's really powerful to know if you do and say nothing, if you just walk in the room, something walks in the room with you. What is that? For better or for worse? And then can you, by being more aware, can you then make sure that you're more in the positive side of that equation than you are the negative? So they're the things that I'd like to cover with you today. And I'll do that, you know, all verbally, fill this in at the end. I've already got a number of things obviously to share, but I'll take in whatever you share as well. And then we'll post it up on the website. And you feel free, if you think this is going to then be of value to other people in your life, then, you know, share it with them. And this is what will help make the world a better place. So does anyone have any questions about what we're going to cover or observations today? Make sure you take yourself off mute. Judy, I can see you saying something.
Could you just confirm, because I've gone recently to the ID website, and could you confirm just where these things will be for me? I would appreciate that a lot. I mean, just on the website, what the URL is or what the domain name is or something.
Ian, you're on.
I'll send that out. Yeah, Judy, I'll send you an email and give you directions to the resources page where they're all saved. No problem.
You go to the resources tab, Ian, right?
Yeah, it is the resources page, but I'll send Judy a link. And yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
No
it.
worries.
Great. If you're from Denver, Colorado, we'll always appreciate you, Judy. Skiing heaven. All right.
Cross your fingers.
I wanted to show you this, guys. This is the culture of everyone who registered. I think we're close to 100 people registered for the webinar today. So when we put everyone's IDs together, this is the mix we get. So we've got a really good representation. And those of you who have attended our past webinars, you know that I in terms of how I prepare and my team prepares for these sorts of events, we look at the IDs, because if we had a whole group of one particular drive, we would slant that accordingly, you know. If it was the verifiers, we make sure we had a lot more data. If it was a lot of improvisers, we make sure it's much more interactive. If it was a whole lot of completers, we make it much more structural. If it was a whole lot of authenticators, we'd probably get someone else to lead it, because that's sort of not my strength. So maybe it would be someone else. I'm kidding, but you know, we vary the approach according to the makeup of the group, and this is very even. This is you know, a good representation of all of the drives. And for those of you who don't know, when I did my initial research, I found that there were pretty, you know, an equal representation in the general population. There were just as many drives up as there were down. And yet that's not what society says. Society says that, you know, you should be more of a verifier than avoid verify. You should know what you're thinking. You should be able to give examples. You should be able to explain yourself. There's a lot of shoulds. When you're in school, you're expected to be much more of a completer and follow the rules and follow the structure and, you know, chunk your work up and do it all in a very organized, methodical way. And yet that's not the way the world is populated. And when we work with teachers and we start to break up the lesson plan so that it's structured to meet the 4 different drives, the level of engagement and, you know, performance of the students is dramatically improved. I did all that work back in the early 90s, and I think some of that I put in my book. So, you know, it's really important to consider all of the different drives. All right, and finally, this is just the comparisons from previous weeks. So you can see it moves each week. Today's fairly, you know, across the board, which is interesting. I want to start with this, because as we talk about the drive, I just want you to do a little self-check-in on yourself today, that if, you know, what this is all about is how to live your life to the fullest and how to thrive and be at your best. And so I think it's a great question. Just like when you put your clothes on of a morning, you look in the mirror and think, okay, do they all look fine? Does everything match? You know, am I ready to go for the day? That's the physical prep that you might do. I think the mental prep is to say to yourself, okay, self, where am I? On this scale of 0 to 10, what we call the peak performance indicator, if that green arrow up the middle is you being a 10 out of 10, you really in stride and getting those things at the top of the chart there, you know, your very best performance, which means making great decisions. You know, things come easily to you. You feel very energized from what you're doing, very fulfilled, a great sense of achievement, and not only your confidence and self-worth and self-esteem, but your health and your energy is all in a great place. If that's a 10, what's your number today? Where are you? And, you know, it can be anywhere. There is no right or wrong answer, but there's a number inside you that comes up that is your truth today. And it might be different to where it was a month ago, or even, you know, last night. Something could have changed for you by today. An email comes in that's really positive and up you go, and a negative email comes in, down you go. And the key, of course, is that although there'll be all these forces that pull you to the left or to the right, expecting you to do things differently, or rocking your boat like an email, the real key is if you have great self-awareness, you can be much more centered and grounded and stay more true to who you are, which is your ID, so that you're always at your best and rather immune to a lot of these things that happen. And there's a lot of work you do to get there. You know, people who live their life at their best every day don't get there because they're lucky. It's generally because they don't stop thinking about it. I remember my Hapkido instructor years ago, some of you might have heard me say this, he was making something look very easy to me. And I said, well, it's all right for you, Scott. You don't have to think about it. It's second nature for you. And he said, Paul, on the contrary, it's because I never stop thinking about it. And that was a great lesson for me, because when I see people pursuing their passions and doing whatever they do that they're excellent in, you know, whether that be in sport or in business or as a teacher or as a nurse, whatever it might be, the people who are really shining are the people where it's like a passion. It's because they never stop thinking about it. And so if you want to be the best parent you can be, the best husband or wife you can be, the best leader you can be, the best student you can be, then it's about, you know, for me, it's always thinking about, okay, am I doing that in stride? And where am I today? And what have I got to do to get back in stride? Some of which we'll talk about today for the Avoid, Authenticate Drive. So I just wanted you to, you know, do this today and think to myself, what's my number? And as I go through some of these things we're about to talk about, see if there aren't some things you can learn that would take that number further north. What I've found is that to be at your best, you want to be at least an 8 out of 10. 7 doesn't cut it, 6 doesn't cut it, but the worst numbers you can be, and I don't say this to offend anybody, I say this to maybe help inspire you to action if this is you. The worst numbers are between 3 and 7. And the reason I say that is why? Because when you're in the middle like that, it's like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's good enough, isn't it? It's not that bad. And not that bad to good enough is 3 to 7. If you were a 2, it's generally so painful that you just like have to do something about it. And you want to make that change. If you're an 8 or a 9, you're flying and you're shining and you're looking for innovation. You're looking for improvement. You're looking for how you can do things better. So there's a drive that's alive, like a fire inside you at either end of the scale. That helps you turn things around or make things better. So I would really encourage you to set that as a mark for yourself. If you want to live your life at the best, aim for being an 8 every day. And I can assure you, it is possible. I feel blessed that I'm able to live like that. But I work with many people who can live with that type of energy and passion and purpose and fulfillment in their life. Are there any questions?
No, good.
Yeah, there's a couple. I think someone's asked about whether we'll be covering the 5s today, Paul.
I'm not sure. And I say that being, I'm just not sure. You know, it depends where the discussion goes. So we might, and if we don't, that might be a discussion then for future, you know, future webinars as well. So let's talk about the drive. So if we get into, I guess to get into the Avoid Verify drive, I just need to explain, first of all, the Verify drive. You know, it was when I was first defining what is that thing I see in somebody, and I did it by a process I called level 4 questioning, which was not just taking people's answers, the first answer they gave, but like digging deeper to understand, but where were you really coming from with that? And as I dug deeper, I found that there was a bottom set of answers that all seemed to be very, very similar. They were into like clusters of the same category. And one of those clusters was what I ultimately called the Verify drive. And what I found was, and think of this instinctively, that it's a drive that's perpetually unsure. It doesn't mean you lack knowledge. It's that you lack the reassurance of the knowledge. You know, you're always needing to check. And the classic example, and I love watching this every time this happens, this is like one of my stories. You know, when you turn up to an elevator and the button's already lit up, like it says the elevator is coming, you know, but a verifier just has to go and push that frigging thing so that the button knows that you're there waiting, you know? And I often sit there and think, why did you push that? Whether it's at a pedestrian crossing or whether it's the elevator, whether when you've locked the car and you just, oh, did I lock the car? Just need to go back and check. Did I lock the front door? Just got to check. You know, that doubt that comes in, it's just perpetual. If I set a meeting with someone as a verifier and, you know, a month later, it was for like a month's time, the part of me that, oh, I better just check and make sure that meeting's still on, is because there's this immediate doubt that's there that needs to just check. And that never leaves you. So I will talk more about that perpetual doubt and how you know, can work with that and combat that when we get into the Verify drive next week. But when you now take just that very quick understanding and say, let's start to use that and unpack that for the avoid verify drive, what does it mean? What it means is that it doesn't mean you don't have doubt, but what it does mean is when you know, there's no need to go and check. Like when that button's lit up, it's lit up, it's done. You know, when someone says, I'll see you in a month at 3 p.m, we're done. See you at 3 p.m, no need to check. My son is an avoid verify, Mitchell. And once I said to him, Mitchell, are we still good for dinner Wednesday night? And he goes, Dad, why are you asking me? Like, now you're making me concerned. Have I said something? Or like, why wouldn't you just accept and trust that what we agreed is going to happen? You know? So he took it quite personally because it's against his makeup to be, you know, questioned like that. Like if it was going to change, he would have told you. So it comes from me as a verifier having that self-doubt, but for an avoid verifier, it just is. So it's the drive that's all about just taking things and like accepting them. If someone says, this is what happened to me, the avoid verifier is very much into like just accepting that and taking it and go, okay, well then it happened. You know, there's no doubt, there's no need for proof, there's no need for examples. It just is. So it's a really strong drive for acceptance. It doesn't, not only question, but it doesn't even regulate and sort of think, well, it's probably like 30% true or 40% true. It's either true or not true, which means what happens for this drive, this avoid verify drive, is it's all about we're either in or we're not in. There's no such thing as I half trust you, I half love you, I half care about you, I'm half committed. It's like I'm either not or I'm 100%. So when someone says, you know, we have to earn trust, you know, you've got to earn my trust. Not for an avoid verifier. If they didn't trust you, you wouldn't be in their life, you know. And if they don't trust you, if something's happened where trust gets obliterated or gets, you know, somehow compromised, then yes, you have an issue. Because for them, it's either that it was a clean sheet of paper, like it was 100% trust, or it's not. And, you know, cleaning that up would be a really important thing to do because they can't operate with half truths or half anything. It's even for them, they'll say, I feel so silly that I invest in myself 100%, but there is no other percent. It's 100 or 0. And that's that full on or nothing aspect to the avoid verify drive. There's no filtering, like no regulating. It's just all or nothing. Does anyone relate to that? Particularly our avoid verifiers on the phone. Can you feel that about yourself? You know, like, and most.
I was going to ask Paul. As a 5, I can identify with what you're saying.
Yes, and you will, Mitch. If we talked about the verify drive, you would go, and I relate to that one too. That's what a 5 means. It's like you can embrace either end of the scale, as it were. You can see it playing out in life, but it's not a drive. It becomes a behavior for you, but not a drive. It's, you know, it doesn't necessarily stir the same level of emotion or reaction as it does for an avoid verify.
So this is Patricia. I'm a 3 in this drive. And when you talk about trust, for me, it's like an on or off switch. My gut tells me either I do or I don't.
Yep.
And if I do, and then it takes a long time for that trust to break, but once it's broken, it's probably not coming back.
Right. Right. And whilst it sounds really hard for me as a verifier, when I first learned about this, I thought, wow, that's really harsh because that's not how my mind ticks. But I sort of love that aspect of an avoid verify. Like it keeps you really honest. And it just is, I love the fact that it's either 100% or 0. I feel sad for them when they give 100% when other people weren't meeting them at the same place. And, you know, that doesn't seem fair to me, but people aren't doing it intentionally, but it's just what happens with an avoid verify.
Yeah, Paul, with my 3 in verify, 9 in improvise, I think the thing that gets me is my dislike of authority and being checked or told what to do. And of course, in the financial services industry, it's constant at the moment. So it questions one's existence in that arena. Yes.
Yes. Thanks, Mike. That's true. So, you know, there's so many subtle things that come from everything we've just been saying. So one of them is, you just talked about authority, Mike. It's authority and it's formality, because an avoid verifier hates seeing things in writing. You know, if you like the minute you can say it verbally, but that sort of keeps it looser. But the minute you put it in writing, like if you wrote an email to confirm, imagine we had this conversation. I said, hi, Mike, I just want to confirm what we just talked about. And I put those things in writing. Oh, that's not confirmation. That's taking that to a whole new level.
No, I wouldn't want to be committed.
But it's something about it. And I'm still understanding this myself. Some of you avoid verifiers might like to explain it. But when it's one thing to have a verbal conversation, but if someone, and I'm not talking about a positive letter, if someone wrote you a beautiful, lovely, romantic letter or a really positive email, that's fine to have that. But if it's to somehow chip you about things or hold you accountable to something and it's in writing, there's something about that. I think it's because they're trying to prove a point or make sure, reinforce something. It's like, leave it alone. I've already got it. I think there's something like that, isn't there? That's the reaction.
Paul, it's Susan here. I'm a foreign verifier, and I know that if I've actually said something and a verifier straight away checks it, or then even sends an email to say, you know, as you've just said, confirms it, it's like, I already know it, I've said it, and please trust me on this.
Right.
That's how I see it.
Right. So I guess putting it in writing invokes a lack of trust or a, you know.
It can do. I get where they're coming from, only because I now understand it. But it's almost like, in case I didn't get it.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, as a verifier, I'm the guy that would send that email. So it's I've had that reaction from people that I presume now are probably avoid verifiers, where they occasionally view it as a lack of trust. Like I said I would do it. Why are you sending me this to me? Are you accusing me of something?
Right. That's exactly right. So I'm not sure how we're going to go time-wise today. So there's some things I want to make sure we cover that I think are like a new dimension for this drive. So I want to talk about empathy. Empathy is one of those traits that we probably all would like to think that we have, but it is the area of strength of the avoid verifier. And this is a relatively new understanding for me, even. It's taken me years to sort of get to this. But I think what happens is, I'll try and explain it to give a lead to the avoid verifiers, because one of the reasons I've struggled to get this understanding is the avoid verify drive is the one that doesn't like to explain everything, you know? So even though I've sensed something here, trying to get the answer has been really interesting for me as a journey to unpack it. But if I think about the verified drive works best with comparisons. So it sort of sees something and then compares, right? So even if I wanted to buy a new stereo, I'd find the stereo I like, but then I want to go and compare it to something else. I could be comparing the equipment. I could be comparing the price. I could be comparing the size, but the comparisons are what bring out some level of, me being comfortable and at my best and fulfilled about what I'm buying. An avoid verifier doesn't do the comparisons. They just become whatever it is that they're experiencing. So one of the things I've noticed is that when someone is sharing with me their emotion, whether that's, say it was a really happy emotion and I've experienced that same situation. So say it was running a marathon and I've run a marathon. I can then sort of go, okay, I relate to running a marathon. Like I felt that. And that is where I'm sharing the emotions. But if someone has an experience where like they've had a car accident this morning and they're feeling all shaken up, I can intellectually relate to, I can sort of go, okay, well, that's really sad that you've had an accident, you're feeling all churned up and so on. But I'm still feeling pretty good inside myself. I just feel sad for them, But an avoid verify, this is both a strength and a vulnerability for you guys. You become that person. You become their emotion. Like part of your not comparing is you become, you're inside that person almost. And one of my first clues was one of my team years ago, it's probably 15 years ago, this lady said to me, I was doing resus on a patient. She was a surf life-saving person. And she was doing resus on this person on the beach. And she said that whilst this person was out, like, Paul, everything she was feeling, I was having this like out of body experience where I was her. I could feel what was happening. It was that, and it was so weird to me. I didn't quite relate to it, but the way she explained it to me I was like, there's something in this. There's something worth, you know, of truth here. I just couldn't quite understand it. But it's a real strength because the person that you're talking to feels so understood. They feel like you really get them and you're really there with them. And it's a vulnerability because you can absorb their energy and, you know, you can get really affected by it. And I'd be interested for those of you who are an Avoid Verify to tell me, is, you know, am I on the money? Would you explain it differently? What is it for you? I think this would be super helpful to the verifiers on the call to understand this.
Yeah, can I just talk about that, Paul? I'm a 2. Whenever I sit down and talk to people, I was just reflecting on a friend of mine talking last night. She's just come through cancer treatment, and she was talking about the fact that she was still, even though everyone now was saying, oh, you should be feeling much happier, she wasn't. And I could absolutely go exactly there and exactly feel exactly what she's doing. And I do a lot of mentoring with people, and really does allow me to feel exactly where they're at and help them to move forward from that.
Yes. I think verifiers can have what I would call it an intellectual empathy. I think the Avoid verifiers have a complete, true emotional empathy with, like, they've become the person's energy, that they're being, you know, and that's a beautiful thing. I watch it in relationships, and because that's not me, I look at it and think, oh man, they're so, like, for example, when someone's sharing pain with, even when I'm the one sharing, I feel like the person's going, wow, they're not trying to help me. They're not trying to balance it and say, but Paul, have you thought about this? They're just there with you, you know, and they just sit in the moment with you, and you feel that they really get you. And then maybe at a later point, they'll try and help you, but it's just there with you.
Yeah, Paul is a 3 in Verify and a former big tough rugby player. People wonder why I tear up in the fairly simplest of situations when I'm buying into somebody else's emotion and drama.
So that'd be right, Mike.
I'm a 3, and I'm the same way as far as tearing up other people's accounts. I mean, and even in television shows or commercials.
Exactly. Exactly. I get that a lot from Avoid Verify. They're like, oh God, I can't watch a movie in public. So someone asked the question, Claudia, you asked the question, is Avoid Verify empathy at the visceral level? Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not just the empathy. We talk about the Avoid Verify drive having this sense of knowing. So one of your greatest talents is this: you either know something or you don't know it. No amount of talking about it, no amount of proof and evidence is going to change it. You just have this gut feel, but it is at a very visceral level. And what I've found is you either have it or you don't. If you do have it, you need to trust it. So, and I've found in my 28, 29 years of doing this, just because people have a talent doesn't mean they use it. And because the world is so verifier dominated, I almost feel guilty as a verifier at times that we've squashed this element of an Avoid Verify because they can't explain themselves or justify this sense of knowing or this gut feel that they have. We tend to dismiss it. And yet for them, it's as right for them as a mathematical calculation is for a verifier. You know, if I do the maths and I find the answer is 4.3, then the answer is 4. Like you're solid in that answer. That sense of knowing is as meaningful to an Avoid Verifier, but when they don't have proof, even they can question it. And people who rock their boat, so in the end they go, oh, okay, well, I don't want to debate you, and there's no such thing as right or wrong necessarily. So for them, it just is. So, okay, well, I'll go with it. I've had people who have walked down the aisle getting married and said, I had this gut feeling, before I walked down the aisle that this wasn't right. But my bridesmaid said, oh, that happens to everyone. They're just the nerves you get before a wedding and blah, blah, blah. And I had a lady, in fact, I saw her yesterday, and she said to me, she was an Avoid Verify. And she said to me, Paul, the wedding is in a week in Fiji, and I can't pull out. I know it's not right, but I can't pull out because all these people have spent money and I'm going to let them down and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, if they are your true friends and they truly love you, they'll probably get most of their money back, but they would die to think that you made a life commitment that you knew wasn't right for you. And I kept wondering, what will she do? she killed, she can't, I shouldn't say killed, she cancelled the wedding. And, you know, I've just spoken to way too many people after the fact when they look back now with more self-awareness, and they can say whether it was that relationship, whether it was that house they bought, whether it was that job move that they made, and they knew it wasn't right with that sense of knowing, but they didn't trust it. So I would implore all of you avoid verifies. If you have a strong sense of knowing, work with it, go with it, have the confidence in it. And you're very fast. For me, when I'm working with an avoid verifier, some of you know Tracy Kennedy, that, you know, is my right hand. And she, if I showed her anything I wanted to, you know, promote, I would just show it to her, and she would just have this reaction and go, well, you know, if you know Tracy, she was going to be full on animated, like the 100% animated or 0. And if I get 0, I'm like, oh, I thought that was really good, but clearly it's not. And there's no need to talk about it or have any discussion. I already know, because I can see her immediate reaction, which is one of the gifts of you avoid verifies, is you'll have a reaction. Whether it's a reaction that we want or not is another thing, but you can't hide the truth, you know? And I do love that about that drive. So it is, which
Paul,
go on.
Paul, could I just jump in there? Because I think just looking at it from the other side in terms of how a use verify could help tap that, you know, the unique talent versus squash it. And I mean, Tracy's not use verify, but she's also very good at this. So she will always, you know, so you gives you something to respond to, you respond to it, and she will then, you know, get into a conversation about why it is, because she knows that there's something in your first reaction that is going to be of value. And I think the danger there is that obviously, even if a use verify thinks that, they may sort of jump in and start asking lots of questions. Yeah, but why do you think that? And what's that about? And, you know, which you know, can have an adverse effect and really sort of close you down, versus finding out what it's really about. So I think, you know, a great skill for anyone is around, okay, I can see, you know, your reaction there. Let's sort of talk that through. Could it be about this? Could it be, you know, maybe it's about that, but just be really conversational, because there will be a bit of gold underneath there that is going to be valuable.
That's a good point, that they don't mind talking something through, but it's talking it through without having a sense of right or wrong about it. It's just truly a collaboration. And the minute that an avoid verifier feels that they're, you know, you're being dogmatic about something, or you're trying to push them to a certain direction, and it's not just an open discussion, they'll start to shut down. And the shutdown, again, is 0 or 100. You know, they're either in the conversation because it's freewheeling, bless you, David, or you know, or it's going to be, they're either out or in, one or the other.
Well, can I just add one thing to that? It's actually about the repetition of the conversation. So the first time, it's really fantastic to have that deep conversation. It's actually when people, the verifiers want to come back and revisit it, that we just go, for God's sake, we've talked about this, can we move on? And why haven't you done something about it? so that's where it can be, you know, a bit of a handicap.
Yep. Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, well, that's what I was saying before about, like, with my son, once you've had it, the people in business, they say, you know, we finished that conversation today, and they often use the term relitigating it. You know, it's like, are we having this conversation again? To a verify, it doesn't feel like we're having it again, because they might be just the subtlest of differences, you know, that we're going to talk about this time. But oh my God, to a like, the verifiers are the ones that want to get it precisely right, but to an avoid verify where, like, it's close enough, I mean, it's definitely the same discussion again. And I know a few of my closest friends, this is exactly what happens, you know. I'm looking at you.
Well, can I just add something there? I think the interesting thing, the crucial word that you said was energy. I know for me, when I'm coaching people, I can actually feel a sense of a shift in someone's energy. And when I call that, they go from their thinking, their logic, down to their feeling. And then that's when they're able to then somehow give that a name, or give that name what that is.
Right.
So I think the energy is something I can see someone and really, I'm very tuned into that. So I think that's probably a really big factor, certainly for me.
Yeah. Well, that's Yep.
And to trust that, and then for me to also be able to name it as well, because sometimes I can't. I can actually sense it, feel it, and it's like an intuition, and I can address it and say it's shifted, but it's more, trying to give that a logical sort of name sometimes is really difficult.
Right. Thanks, Susan. So I want to shift to another dimension of this drive, which is if the verifiers think hierarchically, if you think about a verifier, they make their list and they prioritize like 1, 2, 3, 4. So they've got like a vertical mindset on how they think when they put an org structure together, like a team chart. They'll think of the leader at the top, and then you work the layers of the business down. So there's a sense of vertical thinking about the verifier mind. If they're vertical, the avoid verifier is basically horizontal. So one of the real strengths of the avoid verify drive is everything's on an equal playing field. Everything's on the same level. It's one of the common things said about avoid verifiers is they're just as comfortable talking to the janitor as they are to the CEO. There's no sense of hierarchy or more importance to one than the other. It's this sense of equality. Where that leads you to is collaboration, and for a variety of reasons. But when you collaborate because whereas a verifier wants to think themselves through an issue, like if I had a problem to solve as a verifier, I pick up my pen, I get a sheet of paper and I'd start figuring it out, but it would be me figuring it out. And if I was stuck, then I might go outside to get some other help. An avoid verifier's instinctive reaction when there's a problem to solve is, now who can I talk to? Where do I go to for this? It's a reaching out, not a going down. So think verifier is, in and down. Avoid verify is up and out, so it's a natural collaboration drive. But when you collaborate, people feel like they're being genuinely sought after and included and treated equally and valuably and so on. It's not like they're just good for that one piece of expertise or that one question you want solved. And no matter what their different perspectives are, like if I asked a question of a verifier, I often said to people, like, I'll seek their advice, but if I don't like their advice, I'm probably not going to take it, So there's that sense of I'm looking for something that's right or filling a hole for me. An avoid verifier is absorbing all of that. So we find that the best cross-functional team leaders and the natural collaborators are the avoid verifiers, because there's that sense of equality and openness to all the different styles, and the people around you feel genuinely valued, for their entire contribution. So if you are thinking, where do I shine best? I'd say get on a team. It's the natural team player ID. More importantly, if you can lead a team, and particularly a team of diverse mindsets, you will shine. And more importantly, our own research shows that the best cross-functional teams are the ones led by avoid verify people. So who know, who are in stride and know how to lead that diversity, but that works really well. So I think that's maybe a new way of thinking for that drive for some people. Think horizontal, not vertical. Think about collaboration. That's the way you work best, and therefore the teams you belong to, you want to make sure you then belong to a team where there is that diversity and where you're then valued for what you bring to the table as well. When you're on a team like that, that's when you'll shine. So let's talk about stress. One of the things that happens when you don't have that sense of regulation is it's very easy to get overwhelmed and have everything as a number 1 priority or a number 10 priority. It doesn't matter, they're just priorities. So learning, it's like, well, where do I start? I've got all these requests that have been made of me and they're just all important. It doesn't naturally or instinctively occur that this is the more important and here's the list. So it can be very helpful to an avoid verifier when a verifier comes along and says, oh, well, here's the rank here. This is how you would do it. This is like not how you would go about, but what the rank might be. So here's where you'd want to get started. Whilst that might seem very logical and obvious to a verifier and so natural and so obvious that you wouldn't even comment, to an avoid verifier, it's super helpful to them. Just say, oh, listen, of those 10 things that you've got to do today, just so you know, these ones are the more important to me that we get done. And they're like, oh, thank you. You know, otherwise, you imagine it's like you're almost paralyzed because I've got 10 things to do and I don't know which one is more important. So I've got to sort of like start all 10 at the same time, and that can be overwhelming. And it's the overwhelm that is one of the most suppressing feelings and stressful feelings for an avoid verify. And it's not necessarily because you've got more than you can handle. It's because you don't know where to start, if that makes sense. Help me out, you avoid verifiers. Is this making sense for you? You might want to explain it slightly differently, and I'm open to that, but that's...
No, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was right.
Okay.
Absolutely makes sense. I actually just had this problem today. I had a lot to do, and I'm like, where do I even start? So it makes total sense.
Okay.
And Paul, this is Chris here. Can you hear me? Hi. Hey,
welcome.
Just linking in the stress with the last point that you made with the team player ID. You know, I think for me, truly I've shown when I've led a team, and when I have been part of a team with a strong verifier leading the team, especially not one probably who's done your ID system and isn't that developed, then it can be really, really bad for an avoid verifier. So it can be really, really stressful. So for me, that's led me not to want to be part of a team. It's what led me to only want to either be on my own or leading a team and, you know, going forward, or with the right people around me.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly right. It's one of the things I want to talk about when we do the verify drive. I do want to talk about like the management style of that drive and where it's helpful to a team, but where it's particularly suppressing to a team. And verifiers will often complain about, you know, these people just aren't up to standard. And, you know, I have to do a lot of things myself because I don't trust what they're going to be doing. But when I've studied what really happens, you've sort of brought it on yourselves. And I'm a verifier, and I relate to that myself, that the very thing that I can be bitching about because it's not up to standard, they actually have the ability to do it, but there's something about me that's walking in the door when I walk in that suppresses that sense of excellence. Even though I want the sense of excellence, I'm actually subconsciously, instinctively suppressing it. And that's a weird thing to get your head around, but it's actually what's happening. All right. I want to talk about problem solving with this drive, and I'll talk about geniusness. Actually, I'm going to do the genius one first because I challenged myself with this as to what is the genius with each drive. And I came up with what I would call a white belt genius and a black belt genius. You know, so there's the easy one, or the maybe an obvious one, or a good one to have. And then there's one that's really like profound, you know, and that's what I'm uncovering that for each of the 8 drives. Some of them I know, some of them aren't coming to me just yet, but I'm sure by the time we finish the next 8 weeks, we'll have them sorted. So when I think about what the sense of genius is, this, the sense of equalizing, I would call it, you know, given that you're really into the horizontal side and it's this level playing field, the fact that everyone feels like they got something to bring a value, no matter how important they each are in the room, that sense of equalizing that's the energy that you create. Everyone feels value. Instead of someone being in a room thinking, well, I'm not that important here. I mean, I don't have the same level of credentials or experience or age or whatever it might be, so I will shrink. It's the avoid verify that has this expansionary effect of bringing a level of equality to the group. And just like then the person who might have come into the room with all of the credentials that might have at one point felt that they could dominate the room, something changes that makes it a much more equal and level playing field because of what you do. So I just think it's when I think genius, I'm like, I mean, it's something that you can't necessarily transfer, you can't explain it, it's just what happens. And I think it's really awesome quality. And I particularly wanted to cover the genius elements today because, you know, as some of you may have heard me say, working with differences isn't about coping with differences or understanding differences and tolerating differences. that's such a big yawn to me. You know, who wants to live their life tolerating somebody or coping with somebody or surviving? You know, I've survived in my marriage for X number of years. Who wants that? You know, you want to be thriving and shining. And the place you want to get to with people who are different to you is not to understand them. You want to be in awe of them. You will never be them. You will never become them, but you want to be in awe. I think that's such a beautiful place to be. I have 4 awesome children, and, you know, they are, I watch how they do things, and, you know, my 3 boys are all, so they're all avoid verifiers. And I'm in awe of the way that they talk to me and to others, and the way they address an issue. There's no blame, there's no criticism. They just have a way of delivering it that's very equalizing. And I'm like, oh, how do you do that? You know, I wished I could do. I know I'm never going to be as good. I love just being in awe of the fact that that's their ability to do it. And I can say that about all the different drives. But if you can get to that place where you look at the person that you're working with, you know, living with, parenting, whoever it might be, and instead of being frustrated by their differences, challenge yourself to look in awe of them or become in awe of them. It's such a wonderful place to be. So I don't run out of time, I'll share the black belt one, and then people might have some questions on it. I'm thinking we maybe should have made this webinar like about a whole day. There's so much stuff I could cover. Okay, the black belt one has to be around empathy. You know, when I think about what walks in the door when you do, that is just who you are. Your ability to truly and completely put yourselves in the shoes of somebody else and feel what they're feeling and be who they're being, and then help them on their journey is just an unparalleled ability. I don't see anybody do that as cleanly, as beautifully, and as consistently as the avoid verifiers do it. So whilst it's a human quality that we would all like to aspire to, like being inspirational, you know, or being compassionate, or being, you know, fair, whilst they're values that we might all ascribe to, and their behaviors that we can all do at times, like we can show levels of empathy, but the drive that's going to show the empathy all the time and in the deepest possible way at that truly emotional level, not so that you're feeling empathetic, but so the person on the other end feels that you get them, like you're really with me. And with me means you're not doing anything about it, you're just with me. That sense of connection comes so naturally to the avoid verify, and it's so undervalued and underrated in the world. I wish we could, you know, be a much stronger voice for that particular quality. And maybe as you learn more about this, you can help achieve that. What do you avoid verifiers think of that? Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, I actually have something to say about this. So I think there's this ability, which I see a lot in myself too, just kind of inclusion. Like it could happen. Why I think I have empathy is I feel like it could happen to me. We're all equal, and not one of us is above or below any situation. Like if a person, like you mentioned, got in a car accident, maybe I couldn't relate to that. I know that I could get in a car accident. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's this, could happen. So I think there's an understanding and seeing different sides.
That's great, Michelle. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Is it hot yet in Phoenix, Arizona?
No, it's only in the 80s today, so it's beautiful.
Oh, good, good.
Question in the chat, Paul, just about highly equalised societies such as Scandinavia. Are there more people with avoid verify?
Yeah, you know, guys, there's some really good questions in the chat, and I'd sort of be dishonouring some of you to answer them in the few minutes we've got left. But I will take all those questions and I will answer them offline for you. If they're sort of personal to you, I'll answer them personally and privately. But if they're more something that could help everybody, I'll put a little audio podcast together and share them out with you all so that you know, get the answers to them. I appreciate everyone's passion, and I love answering them and working these through with you. And they make me think and they make me learn more as well, you know, so thank you for asking them. Anyone else want to share as an avoid verifier around this sense of geniusness?
Paul, as you know, I'm actually a verifier, not avoid verifier. One of the things that Alona shared with some of our team just recently around this empathy and feeling, the way she worded it, which I thought was really simplistic and for us all, she said with avoid verifiers, they actually experience the feeling. They're, as you said, right there with them, where a use verifier, we understand the feelings.
Oh, that's great. That's a great distinction. That plays to that visceral comment that we were talking about earlier, Vic.
Yeah. So that's how Alona explained it.
Okay. So I thought I'd finish with problem solving. So problem solving for verifiers is, you know, a process of thinking it through. For the avoid verifiers, no amount of thinking it through solves the problem. And I remember years ago, like some of you know, one of my real passions is working with athletes, and I was working with this tennis player who was what they call on the satellite circuit. You know, it's like the circuit under the whole pro level, and he was like within a whisker of making it into the sort of into the top league, right? And he was a 2 in verifier, and I was there at the court one time watching him practice, and his coach went over and said, "What's his name? Daniel, for God's sake, go over there, sit down and think about it. Think about what you're doing." And Daniel came to me and he said, so I went over and I sat down and I'm like, think brain, think brain, think. And he said, nothing is coming. It's just, he said, it's just this hollow shell booming away, but there's nothing in there, you know? And he said, I had nothing. And I feel so stupid because I'm like, I know I'm smart, but like nothing is happening. And the point is for a verifier, until you have something to react to, no thinking starts to happen, right? So that concept of pondering, reflecting, thinking doesn't come as the way it does for a verifier. And I think this is a wonderful lesson to the verifier, especially verifier parents. Like how many of us have said to our kids, oh, for God's sake, think about what you're doing, you know? And the thinking is what is a natural thing for the verifier. What you want to do for an avoid verifier is give them things to react to. So go to them with a proposal, go to them with a suggestion, and then they've got something to react to. And that's how they operate best. When I was thinking about this morning, I put down, well, one of the things they don't like to do is to make decisions. But I actually realized, and this is the subtlety of this work, it's not they don't like to make decisions, they don't like to make choices. You know, because choices is like where it's either or. And it's, so if I said, so for dinner tonight, children avoid verify, do you want to do Italian or do you want to do Thai? It's like, oh, does it have to be either or? That, you know, that's what goes through the mind. Why is it either or? But to a verifier, it is because it's right or wrong. You know, there's one or the other. But to an avoid verify, it's all. You know, can't we have like Thai Italian, or, you know, they might say, can we have Greek or something, or I don't care. Typically the answer is, I don't care. And it can sound like you're not interested. But what you're really saying is, I'm good with both. You know, and make the decision for me, because that choice is not my thing. If you particularly wanted one or the other, you're craving Italian, then of course you might say, well, yeah, I'd like Italian. But when to you, it's an equal playing field, which is how your mind works. It's like, oh, I don't care. So I would just say to the avoid verifiers, be conscious that I don't care comes across as I don't care. And, but not in the sense of you're okay with everything. It comes across like you don't give a damn. And it means the other person can feel like you don't care about them and what they're thinking and the effort they're putting in and so on. And so it's just, I think, something to be really cognizant of. Guys, as I said, I could keep talking and you could probably keep sharing for a lot longer than this. But I hope in what we have covered today, I want to be respectful of the time. I hope that there's some insights here that have been helpful to you and enlighten you, not only about yourself as an avoid verifier, but you know, as a verifier, it helps you maybe understand and connect differently with, you know, the avoid verifiers in your life. Next week, we will cover the verify drive. So it will be a chance for us to maybe add a little bit to this side of the equation as well. So for those of you who are available, I look forward to seeing you next week. We will record it. We will post it. So if you can't make it, it will still be available to you. But if you can join and add to the discussion and help take all of this forward, I'd love to hear from you and see you on the call. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for being here today. All the best.
Terrific, Paul. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Paul. Good to see you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you too.